I made this message for you. For you. You're gonna do great. You're gonna do great things. You're gonna do great.
What's up, internet, and welcome to Fiction Forge. Our mission with this channel is to help cultivate the love for creating in all you amazing, awesome people out there.
In this episode, we'll be revisiting the beautiful art of acrylic paint dirty pouring to try a hand at a few new techniques.
And when we say new, we mean brand spanking new, because we pretty much made them up.
Although it wouldn't surprise me if somebody else has tried these before, we just didn't see them around online anyway.
And so we feel we should get to name these new techniques, and we want your help to do so. But more about that at the end of the video.
So without further ado, join us in our latest foray into the wonderful world of fluid painting.
So here are the materials we'll be using in this project. Black, white and primary color acrylic paint are good choices for this because potentially any other color could arise from combinations of them. We are using wood glue and water as our pouring medium to make the paint runny enough to pour consistently. We also mix in a few drops of silicone oil to aid in the formation of cells. The kind we are using is made for printers. We are using hardboard to paint on instead of canvas, firstly because we have a bunch of it on hand, and secondly because the paint flows over the smooth surface of the hardboard easier than it does over canvas, and it isn't left with a rough texture after it's dried. A spray can of clear coat to enhance and protect our final result.
And here are the tools we'll be using. Each color you're planning on using will need its own container to mix with the pouring medium and the silicone oil. Something you can shake is preferable for mixing fast. Have a few cups or bottles that you can cut up and modify to pour with. For some of our pieces, we'll also be making use of a couple large syringes. We are using a battery-powered drill to spin the canvas and a nut and bolt with a few pieces of press stick to hold everything together. And finally the blowtorch to help set patterns in place and aid in the formation of cells.
Nice, we're all set. Let's get started. This video was originally going to be about trying a few techniques we saw on YouTube, but we had more than a couple screw-ups trying to replicate people's results.
From problems with technique to problems with paint mixtures, and even the little fan we originally tried to spin the canvas on.
So we decided to try come up with a few techniques of our own. So hopefully we wouldn't mess it up this time.
The first technique we tried out was to spray a syringe full of lead paint onto a canvas.
The result was pretty encouraging. So we figured we'd try adding a tape border to retain the paint and then spin it. Unfortunately, the fan we used couldn't manage the weight of the paint.
So, after a brief interlude to make a new spinner with enough oily to do the job, we were ready to try again, and this time it worked out beautifully.
The next technique we tried involved poking a bunch of holes at the bottom of a receptacle and then taping them closed from underneath.
You can then pour in your paint. Rip the tape off and let gravity do the rest. Again, the result on a stationary canvas was promising, so we had to give it a go while it was spinning.
And instead of round holes this time, we tried some T-shaped slits. And although our camera unfortunately got obscured, the results were still pretty interesting.
For our next attempt, we tried some round holes again, but this time over a spinning canvas. And frustratingly, this time the camera stopped recording just as we started pouring. But once again, we achieved a pretty decent result.
But then finally, we managed to capture the technique in all its glory, and it was worth the wait. We tried our hand at the feather technique, and channel pouring, but unfortunately they didn't go too well. But we'll have to give these another try in the future.
For our final pour, we figured we'd just use up all the leftover paint by layering it into the top half of an upturned plastic bottle.
I started by trying out a few different hand gestures, but eventually I repeatedly moved the bottle from top to bottom of the spinning canvas as the paint poured, and the result was majestic.
I think we just earned a level in dirty pouring technique.
Now all that's left to do is apply a few layers of clear coat to each of the pieces, and then we're done. Hey, you're still with us? Thanks a lot. Now please consider liking and subscribing. And hit that bell icon so you never have to miss out on any of the fun.
Using the forces of chaos to make pretty pictures is all good and well, but what are the lessons we can keep in mind from this?
Well, the way we see it, there are three main contributing factors to the quality of your end results.
First up is the composition of your paint, or in other words, what did you add to it?
Pouring mediums like water and wood glue to change the consistency, setting agents like silicone oil to tamper with its density. Anything that modifies the paint modifies the result.
Secondly is the way you stack the paint up in the pouring receptacle prior to pouring.
The more complex and interesting the pattern in the pouring receptacle, the more complex and interesting your result will be in the end.
And lastly, we have the technique that you use to apply the paint to the surface you have in mind.
This includes hand gestures, receptacles used for pouring, and any manipulation of the surface itself, like spinning it for instance.
Here are a few other useful things to keep in mind. For dirty pouring, try use enough paint on your initial pour to cover the entire surface so that the patterns and the colors will be consistent throughout.
Black, white, and primary colors work extremely well for dirty pouring, because any other color could potentially arise from the combinations of them.
If the paint's too thick, it won't spread out properly, and if it's too thin, the paint will mix and the patterns will break apart.
We're still pretty much beginners at this, and by no account are we any sort of authority on the matter. We have proven that we can get some decent results with cheap materials and limited experience, so we're sure you can do the same.
Damn, making stuff up is fun. Nobody can say you're wrong because you're just riffing.
And you get to name the creations that you feel are worth a damn.
So we've given our three techniques gloriously silly names. First is the drippy bottom. Then we have the fatty splatty. And finally, this one we just call Paul.
But names can always be sillier, Mike, so we need your help. Do you feel these names are sufficiently silly, or can you think of one that just brings a smile to your face when you imagine future generations learning about it?
Well, then leave your suggestions in the comments below and we'll choose our favorite ones.
We'll see you all back here for some more Fiction Forge.